What's up, guys? You are listening to the Lifestyle Hub, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes and into the journeys of inspiring individuals to not only educate you, but unlock your very own potential to live a more healthy, active, and fulfilling life. I'm your host, Jason Grima. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's get this show on the road. Hey everyone, I'm Jason, and I'm stoked to welcome you to my very first episode. This is my new podcast, The Lifestyle Hub. To celebrate the launch, I wanted to take a few minutes to introduce myself, seeing as we are all new to this very exciting platform. So I've done a few posts on my Instagram over the past few days, and I'm going to share a few questions later on that a few people had asked. But for now, I'm just going to kind of draw you guys back to where I'm from, what it's all about, to give you a bit of an insight into who I am, why I'm doing this, and what you guys can expect in the podcast to come. So originally, I'm from the sunniest state on the planet. I'm going to stand by that. It's Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. I'm extremely biased, and I definitely love my home city. A lot of people, when I speak to them, have actually never been to Brisbane. So typically, I'm in Dubai, for those who might not know where I am. But in Dubai, if you're lucky, you'll come across somebody that's been to Australia. And even then, they've either gone to Sydney or they've gone to Melbourne. Very rarely, unless they're from there, would they have actually traveled to Brisbane, which is a shame because in my very biased opinion, Brisbane is the best state in Australia. I'm going to definitely get the conversation started with that one today. But Brisbane, basically, it's a sunny state. I've been there. I was born there in Auckland Flower, and I lived there basically my whole life until I was 22 years old. My background, again, like most Australians, is very multicultural. My mum's side, my mum's Lebanese, and she moved when she was born in Australia, but she moved over with my grandparents during the Civil War in Lebanon. So from mum's side, I mean, mum's Lebanese, we speak Lebanese, I can understand Arabic. My speaking of Lebanese isn't very good, but I can get by. On dad's side, my grandfather his background's Italian. He was raised in Egypt and he moved out to Australia, and my grandmother's from England, so she's English. So we're a bit of a mix. And just to throw you off even more, my last name's Maltese, because the amount of times people ask me, "Oh, are you Maltese?" I'm not Maltese, but my last name is Maltese. So that's a little bit about me from a background perspective. So growing up in Australia, I know this is something that a lot of people have always kind of asked me about. I haven't really, since I've launched all my platforms, you don't really dive back to where things really began. So I want to kind of paint that picture for you now, so you guys get to know me a little bit better. So I was lucky enough to be brought up on a pretty big acreage, 2.5 acres. So Dad, I would say, basically renovated a 2.5 acre block into, I'm going to sound like a snob saying this, but it was amazing. And he needs credit for this. We had a dam, a massive pond he put fish in with a jetty. We had a football pitch, not a traditional football pitch, but a decent bit of yard with some goals. I had a swing set, a massive swing set that was definitely not legal in most childhood parks. We had a massive shed and a nice house with the swimming pool. So I was very, very lucky. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And we had an amazing outdoor, active childhood, my brother and I. Mum was stay at home, which was amazing. So for me, family is such a big thing for me. Anybody that knows me will know that I really value family and quality interactions. And I was lucky enough to have mum at home for most of more or less my younger years, right up until primary school, which is something that these days a lot of people actually might not have the luxury of. I wasn't the most academic person. For me, school was more about mucking around, having fun, somewhat disruptive, but anything to do with sport, I was always very passionate about. I loved playing football, and I played football for the first 16 years of my life since I was 4 years old. So that there is probably one of my most passionate parts of life. I love watching football now. I love playing football. My ability, as I started to get a little bit more interested into weights and gym training, I started to get a little bit muscular. And with that, I technically got a lot slower, and I wasn't so much the first pick in the football teams. And sure enough, my ego got in the way, and I just was like having frustrations with coaches, and I didn't end up pursuing football. For now is a big regret because I would have loved to have kept playing. But it turned me down a different road, which was gym, health, fitness, and wellness. And that's basically how I ended up here. After school, I think this is a big one because I work with a lot of kids transitioning into their young adult careers right now. And I think when I came out of school, I struggled to go straight into any sort of academic, pathway. I was struggling to focus. I didn't want to rock up to uni. I was skipping lectures, basically, bunking on everything that I had to do when it came to academics. I wanted to join the army at that point, actually. So Mum wasn't having it, but it was my main focus. And then they actually pulled the program that I was going to enlist in. So that ended up getting pulled, and it basically forced my mum's hand to hand out CVs on my behalf. So life could have taken me in two very different directions. And I always think about this because it's just a classic ethnic mum move here, because mum actually went out with my CVs and started handing them out around the CBD to try to get me out of the house. And to hopefully, I think she'd gladly still have me at home, as most ethnics would know. But I think this was more of a trying to make sure that I wasn't going to just not, explore my full potential. So the first CV went to Nespresso, which is where my future could have potentially been. But the other went to Fitness First. So Fitness First in Australia is one of the bigger gym chains. And this one was in Brisbane CBD. And we focused primarily on like corporate clients in the heart of the city. So mum handed the CV in there, and I would say within like probably 12 hours of it being handed in, I got a call asking me to come in for an interview. I went in the next day, and after 20 minutes of finishing the interview, I got called to say that I got the job. So I was absolutely stoked. And basically the rest is almost history, because from there I started as a sales consultant. So that was the job. When mum had told me, I didn't really realize that it was from a sales role, which is something that I'm naturally not overly good at. I'm very passionate about health and fitness and training, but it was the perfect stepping stone for me to see the side of personal training that's also quite challenging, which is like selling yourself, the business aspect, but also understanding why people were coming into the gym. People would come in, they would share with me their goals and why it was important for them to train. And then it was my job to try sell them the membership. Now from there, I went into reception. I got to know all the members of the gym. Then I went into group training. I was facilitating all the classes. And that was when I thought it was the right time, after completing all my studies, to actually open my own sublet inside Fitness First, which was like a franchisee agreement, where I would basically be inside the Fitness First facility running my own personal training program. And that was a really, really fun time of my life. I met some amazing people. We had an amazing time. Honestly, it definitely was like a life-changing and a very building time in my life. And I did that for 5 years. So it was a 5-year process that I was based there. So sure enough, I'd started to envision like a plan away. I felt like Brisbane, as amazing it was, and all the people that I'd met, I'd done trips to Lebanon to visit my grandparents throughout my childhood. And every time we'd go through to Lebanon, we would stop in Abu Dhabi. And as Abu Dhabi was the main hub back then, and then Dubai started to become more popular, so we would come through Dubai. And what would happen is we'd stay with some family members that were here at the time. And it was so incredible. It was such an incredible city. It was like nothing I've ever seen before. It had the ethnic Arabian aspects that I loved, because growing up in Brisbane, it was a very Australian suburb. There was no tabbouleh, there was no hummus, there was no Lebanese bread, there was no culture, I would say. And when my grandparents would come to visit, my tata would be cooking tabbouleh, hummus, kafta, you name it, kibbe, everything that I'd known growing up, but it wasn't something that you could just go and buy down the road. So when we'd come to Dubai, I could literally walk down the road and just get some tabbouleh and some hummus and have a falafel and whatever. It was such a cool experience. So the only times that I'd really felt that was when I went to Lebanon. And this was like a halfway between. It was like the Western side meets the Arabian side, all in one spot. And that's how I really fell in love with Dubai. So from that moment onwards, for about 3 years, I started to like envision a plan to try and move out here. And I'd done a recon trip back in 2016 where I actually contacted trainers who a few now are actually my friends. Like I remember contacting Rob Sharp. I sent you a message and I'd followed you on IG. and you were a trainer, X amount of thousand of followers, this and that, training in Dubai. And what's funny is, I mean, Rob and I have actually had workouts together, and we've sat down and had chats, and, you know, we became mates. So at the time, I messaged a few trainers to just say, hey, can I sit down? Can I have some time with you? Let's have a coffee. I'd like to try and find a way to move out here. So sure enough, after doing my research, I went back. There was no real direct avenue, and I was looking at lining up into fitness first. But I'd seen a job come up one day, and I felt like it was meant to be, because I'd been following a gym facility called Ultimate Performance, which I'm going to be biased and say that they do produce some of the best coaches and the best results to date globally. And I thought, I saw a job saying hiring in Dubai. So this facility was opening brand new. And I thought, what are the chances? Honestly, I didn't believe that I could actually get a job like that. I really didn't. So I did the application. I went through that process. And sure enough, one thing led to another. After a few interviews on Zoom, a flight to Sydney, to the actual Ultimate Performance Club in Sydney, back on Zoom, I was offered the job to come over, I think it was about 6 months later, to start as a junior personal trainer at the Ultimate Performance Gym in Dubai. So that was amazing. For me, a dream come true. I honestly still have the video. I'll share it with you guys. So take a look. Well, I'll cut this little bit up of this video today. But I've got a video. I remember I was sending it to some family saying, guys, I got the job. I'm coming over. And I was absolutely stoked. And it honestly, everything has come, so much has come from that. So yeah, that's how I ended up here, which brings me on to the next part of the podcast. I've lived in Dubai now for 6 years in August. So time has flown by. So that was like the stepping stones to this point. And then let's fast forward 6 years. And here I am in front of you guys today. So what do I do for a living? Now, a lot of you know this, but my profession is body transformations, or I'm more or less a coach. I don't like to call myself a fitness coach, because I think I cover so many more and different aspects. Those who know me, I think there's so much more to it than just purely exercise, purely nutrition. There's like health and wellness really come together when you execute on a number of different levels. Exercise, mindset, nutrition, lifestyle habits, enjoyment levels. There's so many different points that come into play. Stress levels, sleep, all of these things that sometimes are undervalued. I try to bring into one full package and take that on board when I meet clients and take them through the process. So I've since opened a company after leaving Ultimate Performance. I opened my own company called the 365 Physique. We specialize in body transformations. And we facilitate full wellness experiences through semi-private coaching, which focuses primarily around weightlifting, burning calories, nutrition, mindset, healthy habits, taking yourselves out of the comfort zone. And something that I really love to see is people come to me basically at ground zero and then move out, into almost like this everyday hero, which is something that I love to see. They're more capable. They've got no limits. So for me, that's really rewarding. And that's one of the main ethoses at the 365 Physique. What am I passionate about on weekends? What do I do? How do I fill my time? I think whatever you haven't seen it's more or less what you've seen on IG is where I'm going with this. I'm pretty honest and day to day with whatever I post on socials. But I spend a lot of time outdoors. I spend a lot of time hiking, off-roading, exploring. I love my Jeep. Since getting a Jeep, this isn't a sponsored ad, but I love Jeeps. I think they're such a practical car. I have 2 amazing Huskies. So they love to explore. They love to be outside, despite what people would say with the heat and whatnot. They actually have a really nice life here in Dubai, and I try to keep them busy outside as much as I can. I love cooking. I try to spend most nights cooking. I feel like it relaxes me. A little bit of things that people didn't know is I used to play the drums for 4 years. I was in the Air Force band back in Australia. We did marches, and I'd play the drums and literally like have a drum set over me and like play the drums and march along the streets, which was pretty funny. I've been trying to learn the guitar, and I'm going to say that I can play the harmonica, but a lot of people would argue that, and it's absolutely terrible. I love tattoos, and of course I love football, which is no surprise. So here we are. Guys, I'm going to kind of go into a bit more detail into like more of my personal life in Dubai. I want the podcast to really like open up some more intimate channels with me. And obviously even try to explore those channels with our guests that we eventually we get onto the podcast. But I think it's good for you guys to know a little bit more about me. I've kind of shared things in drips and drags, and you know what I've been so surprised about with social media is like, it's crazy, but there's people that I have that are like almost like friends that I've never actually met in person. I've only known them on social media channels, but because I've been so open with different experiences and different journeys, so many of these people have reached out to me and said, hey, we relate to what you're saying, or, you know, I'm glad that you shared that, it helped me with this. And it's made me realize like what an amazing platform social media can be. Despite all the ups and downs, like anything, there's always positives and negatives. But I think one of the main positives is that connection to so many different people. And I want to kind of continue that and extend that connection now with you guys. So like trying to really dive into things a lot more. So when I first got to Dubai, I was in a long-term, I would say an on and off overseas relationship, more or less, that I'd like to consider. So it made life a little bit tricky. I was kind of had my mind elsewhere and I was trying to build a life here. I was away from my family. I made some really good quality friendship connections at that time when I'd first moved into a villa in Jumeirah with Kelly, Nat, and Jamie. I'll give you guys a little shout. But you guys were like the family I didn't have when I was here, and it was amazing. We had such a great setup and I was so fortunate to come into such like a caring, loving household. But trying to manage that long distance relationship was tough. And I think it's a lot of things people struggle with when it comes to long distance, and especially the city that Dubai was, that eventually fizzled out. And I was more or less solo for quite a while. Now the PT industry is a tricky one. Like when it comes to like dating and socializing and going out, etc. I'm up most days at 5 a.m., 4 a.m., and I'm in the gym at 6. And if I'm not working, I'm not necessarily getting paid. So I don't have any leave. Like I'm on the hour, I'm on the clock. So for me, I was over here to make money. I was over here to build a career. So I put so much time and energy into trying to, 1, build my brand, 2, get results with my clients. And 3, kind of, I felt like when I was busy working, I didn't think about how far away I was from my family. And there were times where like the anxiety set in, and I feel like that's something that I still have. I go through patches where I have higher levels of anxiety, undiagnosed, but it's definitely something that like triggers me at certain points. And over the few years, I've gotten so much better at actually handling it and managing it. And that's stuff that we'll cover in a lot more detail on the podcast. And we'll have some professionals on to talk about mental health and how it can help you. But it's definitely something that everyone experiences in some form or another, and at different levels of severity, really. So plodding along solo, going about my business here and there, you know, meeting new people, making new interactions. I was quite lucky in the sense that Nat, who was one of my housemates at the time, Nat worked for Dubai 92, which is, I'm going to say now, the second best radio station in Dubai, because she won't be happy with that. But obviously Pretty, who I'll introduce later in one of the episodes, but Pretty Malik's on Virgin Radio. So they're kind of, I wouldn't say they're rivals, but they're 2 of the leading stations here in UAE. Anyway, Nat worked for Dubai 92 and she was on the breakfast show, and I got to actually experience so many incredible experiences with her, because whenever Nat and Harry would go to any sort of events, Jamie, who is now Nat's husband, who was my best mate at the time, we'd get tickets. So we'd actually go along to biggest brunches, buffets, concerts. I remember went to Peter Andre concerts, like you name it, like I was there. And so that first year, I think I actually experienced Dubai unlike a lot of people who had first moved over would. And I'm extremely grateful and thankful for that. So I think when and as Nat and Jamie moved back to Australia, I definitely had like a period there where I struggled. Like I felt quite solo and alone. I got into my head quite a lot. And then I was trying to just focus on going, okay, I'm just going to set my plan. I'm going to head home, see my fam, and then come back to Dubai. And by the time I did a few trips like that, it started to get a little bit better. COVID had different ideas. So COVID was a crazy time, and COVID in Dubai was tough. And during COVID, a few things happened that basically have shaped where I am today. And kind of some things that I haven't really been open about, and there'll be a time and place for me to speak in those in more detail. But a few highlights came out of it. I got Loki. So Loki is my husky, and I love him to bits. I've had 2 border collies back in Australia growing up, which are like sheepdogs, and I've always been a dog person. And they got to 11 and 12 years old before they passed away, and they had a great life. And then since being out here, I'd always wish I could have a dog. I just wanted a dog more than anything. I never thought it was possible, but I was in a relationship at that time that I felt was quite serious at the time. And one of the conversation led to the next, and I ended up with Loki. So I was lucky enough to meet Loki as a puppy. I met him from about 2 weeks old. And I actually made trips to visit him an hour away every single week until he was old enough for me to take home, which was 8 weeks. So I saw him grow up from 2 weeks, 3, 4, 5, 6 onwards. And we actually built a really cool bond even before he actually, was allowed to come home with me. And I'll show you guys the video, but there's a video where I'm sure of it that Loki picked me, because out of the litter of puppies, he actually walked through all the puppies, came up to me and put his hands on the top of the bowl and started barking at me. And I'll show you the video, but it's honestly, for me, I straight away knew he was the one. And I think he's been attached to my side ever since. So Loki came into my life during that COVID period. But as my relationship escalated, I also ended up getting married during COVID, which is something that a few of you know, a few of you might not know. Those who followed me during that period would have seen that transpire. Of course, everything these days goes through social media. So I got married during COVID. Now, one thing led to another, and maybe looking back, maybe life wasn't quite normal. I mean, it's safe to say life wasn't normal during COVID. I think life was like it not normally is. So I probably ended up in a situation that perhaps I wouldn't have ended up in had it not been COVID, but it's, I'm not here to speculate. That marriage ended up ending in the early months of 2022. So a couple months later, I ended up divorced. So mid 2022, I'd been married, I'd been divorced, and I was honestly, it was a really tricky transition. I never expected to go through. For me, marriage was always something that I was really excited about. Just from being from a big family, being to so many big family Lebanese weddings, coming from a family where both my parents were together and valued marriage, it was something that I was really always excited to have. And that ended a lot quicker than I'd ever anticipated, in a way that I probably, I'm going to safe to say, never expected. And that's something that I'm going to save for another podcast. So stay tuned if you want to know the details about that one. But it ended. And it took me a little bit of a while to clear my head, but one thing led to another, and life kind of transitioned. I made a few kind of different career moves. I think a lot of the times my clients are a big credit to actually keeping my headspace on track. I go and kind of, as much as I coach them, there's elements of where they would coach me and help me with certain things. So we went through that transition together, and then I was able to meet my lovely girlfriend now, Victoria, and she pushed me through that period quite a lot. I think for anyone who's dating somebody that's been divorced, I think you have to give credit to that person, provided that they're being supportive. But it's a tricky one coming in as that third person when someone's going through an unfinished divorce. It was important that I was really honest and transparent with where I was at in that process. So she was very clear and understood, but she was also very supportive and patient with all of that. And that was, I would say, game changing for me, because if someone had come through that period where my head was all over the place and tried to smother me or, interrogate me or to put pressure on me, I think things, definitely wouldn't have worked the way they have now. And I'm actually in a really, really amazing space, as far as love life's concerned. And again, that's more that I'll love to share with you guys as the podcast progresses. So a lot of people, one of the questions people asked me was paint a picture into your lifestyle and the day in the life of you. What do you get up to? And it's not that exciting. I'm going to be totally honest. I wake up every day at 4:30. I try to get myself in the most positive mindset possible. I walk my dogs, and the whole time I'm walking, I'm either listening to a podcast, and that's, again, I'll share why I've got to this point, because I really love having a podcast. I love having positivity, listening to positive people. And that sets me up for my first session of the day, which starts at 6 a.m. I'm in the gym most days until about midday. I hit the gym myself. I obviously value keeping myself in shape. It's such an important thing when you're coaching clients, to make sure that you look in shape. So that's a very important part of my day. I also train for mental health and the way it makes me feel. In Dubai, I try to avoid most crowded places after 3 p.m. The streets get busy, the gyms get really busy, and I try to choose to spend more time with my dogs outside. I hit the desert, in the backyard, going for walks, going for runs, hitting the beach. And then I'm winding down really by 9 p.m. Like 9 p.m., I'm getting ready for bed and getting ready to do it all again. So I'm not much of a night owl. I fall asleep in most movies that Vic and I will try to put on almost instantly. So I feel bad for her in that sense, but it's just the PT life. And anyone listening that's a trainer, you'll totally understand. And weekends, I love to spend time with Vic and the dogs and any close family and friends. And I'll rarely drink, but when I do, and everyone kind of doesn't see this one coming, but I do love a tequila. And my cabinet of tequila, I'm looking at it, sitting right next to it right now, is actually filled with tequila because everyone seems to get me tequila as gifts. So I don't know where that's come from, but I don't drink it that much, guys. I don't drink it that much. So I want to kind of talk a bit more about the podcast now. Like that's given you a bit of an insight into how I ended up here. And I hope maybe a few of you learned a few new things. I wanted to create this podcast because when I first arrived in Dubai, there were times where I felt lonely, like I'd mentioned earlier. And the easiest way to kind of find some sort of connection was actually listen to podcasts. And I know it sounds depressing, and I wasn't all tears and sad stories, etc. I was just like, I was focusing on work. And I think a lot of people are in this city to focus on work. And sometimes you have to block out a little bit of the noise, or you might not fit in certain social circles. You might not just want to be around people. So you do find yourself alone. I think everyone does experience this at some point. And for me, that answer wasn't alcohol, thankfully. It wasn't mixing with the wrong crowds. I actually just put my head into training, but also listening to podcasts. And I felt like that I'd actually subconsciously built like relationships with the people that I was listening to. I felt like I knew them. I felt like they were a support network for me. I felt like they were a friend. And for me, that was like such a positive environment to be in. And it was like a really exciting environment. And that's why I thought I'd love to be able to find a way to connect with you guys in the same way, but also share the stories of all the lucky, or I'm lucky, who have met so many incredible people. So I want to share their stories with you. They've come from different pathways, different levels of success, many different backgrounds, different nationalities. And all these people are people that I probably never had the chance to meet had I stayed in Brisbane. And I speak to my mates back home every day, but life more or less is kind of moving in your very predicted manner. I think that happens in most home cities, whereas Dubai, unless you've been here, it's a city where anything is possible. Anything can happen. You can start any business. You can meet anybody. You can go out one night and anything can really happen. You just don't know. And it's such an exciting place to be. And I wanted to share that with those of you out there. And, I'm not hyping up Dubai here purely based on that, but it's an incredible place to be. And I've met so many cool people. So I thought, why not combine a little bit of my knowledge around health, fitness, and wellness with a few of all the wisdom and the advice and the knowledge from people that have actually gravitated and crossed paths with me in the time that I've been here, and then share and spread that knowledge back out to you guys. So that is kind of the main reason behind the podcast. And a perfect example, I was thinking about this the other day when I was starting to prepare notes for this episode and it's still a surreal moment. I'm going to crop this one up as well, and we're going to reel it for you guys, is last year, I was actually lucky enough to not only meet, but actually knock around a football with a football legend of Australia, Tim Cahill. Now, I don't want to sound, it's going to sound like I'm a bit of a suck up story here, but for those who knew me when I was a kid, I wrote we had to do a biography on a player or any sort of famous person as a kid. I did mine on Tim Cahill. I wore the Socceroos jersey. I watched every game in the 2006 World Cup. The whole country was singing his name when he was scoring goals in all the World Cups since, more or less. And for me, he was like an Australian icon, and to actually last year have the experience to actually meet him, but not from a fan zone perspective. I wasn't at a jersey signing, or I wasn't, waiting in line for hours just to get a signature and a selfie that, no one would ever remember. I actually was lucky enough, thanks to a mutual friend of mine, Nigel, we were actually able to meet down at a facility called Ballers in downtown, and just chatting on a personal basis with Chris, a few friends of mine, his brother Chris, his son Kaya, just having a kick, knocking the footy around. And we ended up actually having a football game. And that night we had a game. It was France versus Australia. Bakary Sagna, who's a French international for Manchester City Arsenal ex-pro, with Tim Cahill on the other team. I'm playing on Tim Cahill's team. For me, I literally had to pinch myself. Like I was like, that was such a genuine, chilled, such a good experience. It wasn't like a fan zone. It was just a good chat, knocking the footy around. I'm like, where would I have had that chance or that opportunity? And of course, it came through in Dubai. And that's something that I want to kind of share those experiences with you, share those people that come through that I'm lucky enough to experience and give you guys some value from that. So hopefully one day we'll get Tim on the podcast. Let's see if I'm lucky. So guys, things to look forward to. The next episode is going to be on, I think at this stage, this episode will be launched on Monday week. So Monday the 13th, we're going to probably launch this one. And then every fortnight after that, you guys can expect to see 2 podcasts per month that will have special guests on. And I'm going to announce those in the next podcast. So there's the hook for you to listen in. And then every month you'll get a little bit of time with just me. And that's where I'll focus more on health, wellness, maybe some personal topics. But really just to kind of, share my knowledge as well, because I have been in this game for now over 10 years, helping people transform their lives. So I've got a bit to share with you guys as well, but I'll make sure that we spice it up with a few special names as well. So guys, if you can, while you've got your phones handy and whatnot, subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google. The podcast will be up on YouTube as well. So if you want to get a bit more visual version of it, but try to click the subscription and then you'll be notified whenever the next episode drops. Okay, just so you guys know, you can stay in the loop. Stay tuned, guys, in the weeks leading up to the podcast on my Instagram, on my social channels. There'll be opportunities to get involved and ask some questions that I can then directly ask our guests. And then I can get those questions answered for you in the upcoming podcast. Okay. And there'll be plenty of giveaways, plenty of, prizes and collaborations. I'm going to really try and make this podcast as interactive as possible for you guys. And obviously I really appreciate having you guys all on board. I was nervous to start. I'm not going to deny it. I am quite natural talking, but I think to speak about myself is something that you probably won't believe me now. Obviously, I've just spoke about myself for probably 30 minutes, but it's something that was a bit challenging at first, and I wanted to see what level I would break it down on. But the goal of the podcast, guys, is to educate and empower more people to live a healthy, balanced lifestyle. I want to kind of give some real life, raw topics thrown in, and I'm going to be interviewing industry experts, some of which happen to be close friends of mine. And I'm hoping to do some coaching on air with listeners like you to create unique experiences about the show, but you'll also get some solo experiences as well. So other topics you guys can expect to hear will be all things wellness, fitness, bodybuilding, nutrition, business startups. There's some really inspiring stories when it comes to that. We've got career progressions and the way people have, come from almost nothing in some cases to having successful businesses on so many different levels. Mental health, a very, very important topic, and relationships. We'll talk about making friends, moving countries, life in Dubai in general. I'm lucky enough to be able to have some influential people come on and they'll be able to share their life stories with you. And I'm really confident that anybody who listens will be able to find something to connect with and to learn and take some value away from. So lastly, guys, for the next episode, I'm going to say, listen in. I hope you've had enough hooks today to really kind of value subscribing, having a listen to next week's podcast. And that's where I'm going to announce the juicy news of who's coming in over the next couple of months, more or less. I do want to ask a quick favor, though, before we go. If you're enjoying the podcast, please let me know. Obviously, as many comments and feedback as possible would be greatly appreciated. It will help me continue to improve the quality of service that I offer, the quality of information and the connection that I give. So I'd really appreciate that. I'd love to read your reviews. Maybe some of them will make it on. We'll do a little bit of a read time at the end. This lets me know that listeners like you liked or disliked, and so I can make sure I'm giving you content that you all learn to love and you love to hear. So finally, please subscribe in the app that you're using to listen to the podcast so you can receive news about any new episodes as they are released. Don't miss out. But thank you so much for joining me on the start of a very, very exciting journey. This still feels pretty insane. I'm definitely going to be pretty happy as we wrap this up because I think I'm very excited for the months ahead. But thank you for joining me, Jason Grima, on the first episode of the Lifestyle Hub podcast. For now, that's it, and I'll see you next time.